we will slowly march all together up outside the police station. But please remember to socially distance and to be peaceful. Let's show the government that we're not going to take it lightly for them to stop us from peacefully protesting.
Kill the bill!
Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Kill the bill! Who's right? Our race! Who's right? Our race! Who's now? Okay, this is going to be a peaceful protest, but this is going to be a very angry protest, because people have got to understand that the democratic rights of Luton or any other town in this country are not going to be taken for granted. So we're going to have a very vocal march from here, now up to the police station, and then we're going to make everybody know exactly how we feel about this situation. So if people like to follow me, please. Thank you. Come and take over the mic, please. Hello, brothers and sisters, comrades. I'm from the Luton Palestine Solidarity Campaign. From the Luton Palestine Solidarity Campaign. Can you hear me now? Okay, we in the Palestine Solidarity Campaign support this march and the whole Kill the Bill campaign 100%. We have been struggling for many, many years for Palestinian rights. Human rights have been put down by the Israeli military for many, many decades now. And we understand what it means when they stop us protesting down in Israel. They actually will shoot us if we persist. You think about Gaza, how many children, medics, women, children, as well as journalists have been murdered by the Israelis, and they continue today for anyone who protests to shoot them, kill them and to maim them at will. Even in the West Bank, children are killed for throwing stones, protesting, are taken in the middle of the night and arrested. It is a disgrace. And to think that this government, our government, supports the Israeli system 100%. They'll do nothing at all internationally or any statement to oppose the Israeli actions. Shame on the UK government!
We understand what this means, because this is the transfer of powers that you will see slowly and surely in that direction. They support those methods, and they will bring them here if they can.
Right, the next person I've got on my list to speak is Ijo Khan, who's the coordinator for the Muslim LGBT Network for Luton. Please put your hand together for Ijo.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming and thank you for organising this. My name is Ijo Khan, I'm a human rights activist. I have been for 4 centuries now. I was at the protest in Parliament Square in London. This protest is not against individual issues that we have today. They're just upholding the law as best as they can. They're just doing their job.
That's right.
Let's not be violent or aggressive towards them. Ask others not to be evil. It's not against anyone who wants this protest, but rather these liberty. We have this freedom because we're a secular, liberal democracy which upholds the right to protest and the right to have our voices heard. We cannot let this government bring in these draconian laws which will oppose our civil liberties. We have to stand together and say, kill the bill. We will not be silenced as a community. I'm speaking to you as an openly gay Muslim man who is the coordinator and founder of the Muslim LGBT Network in Luton. I would not be alive today if I lived in Saudi Arabia or other countries which have the death penalty against gay people. So those are the kind of things we're fighting against. We're fighting against those very prejudices. You have to understand we have a government today who don't want us to uphold our rights or assert our individuality. We have to do this as a community. All over Britain today, people are protesting. We mentioned before, cities and towns all over the country, not just in London and in Luton. I'm so heartened to see everybody out. Like I said, let's take distance, and please, let's have a good time today as well. So thank you very much.
Kill the bill!
Kill the bill!
Kill the bill!
Kill the bill!
Protest rights are human rights!
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 Whose streets?
Our streets!
Whose streets?
Our streets!
Whose streets? Thank you, brothers and sisters. Okay, I suspect you might have heard enough of me this afternoon, so I'm just going to keep this very brief. I represent Luton Trades Council, and there's a few things that we need to be very clear about. When our side says no return to business as usual, it means something very different to what Boris Johnson and the Tories mean when they say no return to business as usual. We know what that means. It means draconian laws like this that are an absolute outrage to every historic tradition we have in this country. It means to try and repudiate institutional racism inside this country. That's what they mean by that. And it means a system whereby the rich people in society can sit back during lockdown and poor people can come and deliver goods and services to them across the country. That's what they mean by business, a return to business as usual. When we mean and say no return to business as usual, we want a complete re-evaluation of what's important in this society. So we look at the key workers that we were cheering this time last year, and we're going to make sure they're properly valued in terms of what income they receive, every single right and entitlement they should have, they should get. And we have to be very clear as well that our side are making a lot of advances at the moment. The British Gas GMB workers are on their 43rd strike day at the moment. It's a pandemic and they're still fighting. Don't for a minute think they're just fighting for themselves, they're fighting for all of us. They're fighting for everyone here. You look at the Deliveroo workers. A year ago they were considered an absolute joke. Why are they trying to take on a big firm like that? But they've had a fantastic series of results during the pandemic, as have the Asda retail workers. Very slowly and surely, there are all these little victories that are popping up. And this is during a pandemic. So I'd like to say, we've got a war on our hands, but the truth of the matter is the war is going on now. Battle has commenced. And this is the first side of life that Luton is showing, but believe you me, it's not the last. And I think people need to be very mindful of the people of Luton, because when they're disregarded and when they're marginalised, I'll tell you what they do, they burn down town halls. 100 years ago, and that's what we'll do again. So this isn't the biggest demonstration I've ever been on, but I tell you what, it's not the smallest. I want everyone to go back to their homes, I want everyone to go back to their workplaces and tell them how great today was, but the problem was they weren't with you. So the next time we do this, it's twice as big, and the British working class are going to have a reckoning that everyone's going to remember. Thank you, brothers and sisters, see you soon.
Well, in 1274, peasants of Luton had had enough of this, and they got together, they formed a protest, they got themselves organised, and they held a protest march from here in Luton down to St Albans to make their case to the abbot. Protest is how we hold unjust power to account. Whether that was the medieval church in the old days, whether it's the fossil fuel companies today that are destroying nature and that are robbing a sustainable future for our children. Whether that is white power structures that hold people of colour back year after year, whether it's systems of male privilege that threaten the safety of women and girls. Protest is how we stand up to these powers. It's how we stand up to those who think they are entitled to take what they want. Whether that's the atmosphere and the trees, and the fish and the water and the land. Whether that's the safety of people, whether it's our freedom, whether it's our civil liberties. It's how we stand up to those who would take away our breath, whether that's from pollution or from violence. Protest is how we stand up. And today, we're standing up to a Conservative government, to Boris Johnson and to Priti Patel. Now,
there's nothing pretty about her.
Now, protest isn't the only way that we hold power to account. There are other ways. We had elections. If this bill wasn't in the manifesto, nobody voted for this. This is a government that realises it has a majority and it can do whatever it wants. So in this instance, elections hasn't worked. It hasn't held power to account. Another way to hold power to account is a free press. But that doesn't work well in this country either, because it's controlled by billionaires. And the billionaires are well served by our government of millionaires. And they're not telling us the truth. I didn't control my paper here. This new policing bill will grant police sweeping new powers to deny permission for protests, to control where and when they happen. They want to control how much noise we can make. It's literally trying to silence us. And if protest is all we have, because elections aren't working, and because the free press isn't working very well, then it's no surprise that they're coming for the protesters. Those of us involved in Extinction Rebellion know what it looks like when the police overstep the boundaries. A couple of years ago, they tried to, illegally as it happened, ban protest across the whole of London. We kept protesting anyway. Those of Black Lives Matter know what it looks like when the police overstep the boundaries. When they tackled people in London during a pandemic, a thoroughly irresponsible thing to do. And even those attending a vigil for Sarah Everard recently experienced heavy-handed policing. So why, at a time like this, with those kind of things happening around us, would we hand more power to the police? Demanding equality, insisting that Black Lives Matter, demanding climate action, these are not unreasonable things. It is opposing them that is unreasonable. Rather than fixing the problems, the government is going after those who are demanding the solutions. And you know what? They've forgotten what protest has won for us in the past. Protest is annoying, it is disruptive. When we do this, we are annoying, we know that. But if it wasn't for the suffragettes, Priti Patel wouldn't even have the right to vote, let alone the right to be a member of Parliament and Home Secretary right now. We mustn't forget what protest has won for us in the past. Protest brings progress. It breaks open new possibilities. And so we will not let the government stand in the way of a fairer and more sustainable future. And so we will protest. And we will not be silenced. Now let me come back to those medieval peasants that I began with. That protest march in 1274 was ultimately not successful. But neither was it the end of the story. You see, if you look around you now, there's no abbot of St Albans in charge of Luton anymore. There isn't even an abbot of St Albans. There's a bishop now. Years later, those protests sprung up again. And this time it wasn't just in Luton. During the Peasants' Revolt, protests spread across the whole town, the whole country. And word came through that the abbot of Bury St Edmunds had been deposed. And people turned their eyes once again on St Albans. And a delegation was sent to London to petition the king. But people didn't wait for their return. They marched to St Albans. And along with the people of St Albans who were also oppressed, they broke into that jail and they set the people free. They tore down the fences that marked out where the church land was and they declared it all common land. And they took the church records that said who owed what in taxes and took all their land rights and their land charters and they burned them in the town square. And the abbot ran for his life. And that was 1391, and no abbot of St Albans has bothered Luton since. Protest is how we call unjust power to account. We have always protested, here in Luton and across the history of humanity. We will always protest unjust power, and we will not be silenced.
Thank you, Jeremy. Right, the next person who's going to speak is part of a cause that's very close to my heart. Can I introduce Bradley from Stop HS2?
Yes, Bradley!
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bradley, and you might think that's a strange name for a middle-aged hairdresser. You'd be right. Bradley is the name that we give to HS2 activists. I'm an HS2 protester, and in a moment I'm going to tell you why I'm so not passionate about protesting HS2, but why I think it's an absolute imperative that we all should be protesting against hideous corporations like HS2 Limited and how they are facilitated by a corrupt government. But first of all, I just want to make something very, very clear. Our rights to protest are already being oppressed, and people everywhere are being arrested and criminalised for exercising this inalienable human right. People from travelling communities and other marginalised groups are already disproportionately affected by the police and the law. The main difference that this bill is going to make is that the criminality of these actions and people will be made explicit and take away people's right to fair trial. Our laws were created on the basis of a shared morality to protect people, and a sea change occurred when law was passed to place the protection of business above the protection of people. And really worryingly, these days the protection of business and corporations against the very environment that sustains us and will keep us alive in the future and for our children and for their children. That's what's happening. Business is being placed before the rights and the protections of humans and our environment upon which we depend. Laws to protect the wealthy elites and to further inflate their vastly overstocked bank accounts and investments are being placed before our health, our well-being, and the rights of the masses that are being exploited on a daily basis to create more wealth for the elite. I see that happening on a daily basis when I'm protesting against HS2. For those of you who don't know, I'm going to tell you a little bit about HS2 because you might not know much about it and how it's actually affecting you in your pocket. HS2, to me, is the embodiment of everything that's wrong with our system. It embodies greed and profit over lives and livelihoods. It's anti-democratic, and it seeks to make billionaires out of millionaires at the expense of habitats, homes, health. Did you know that 51 out of 53 local authorities voted against HS2, which is a high-speed rail link between Euston and Birmingham, then on to Birmingham and Manchester and Leeds? 51 out of 53 local authorities voted against it, yet this government pushed it through. and fed them, and that our civil servants fed them. And upon those lies, they voted. Did you know that that voted away £7,700 from every taxpayer's pocket? Every single taxpayer in the UK will be paying for HS2. Now that route, 140 miles, will just be like a joyride for the elite. People from the south, down in Cornwall, up to the north of Scotland will be paying equally. They'll never have any benefit from this train line. Neither will we won't be able to afford a ticket. But we're all going to be paying for it. We're going to be paying for it financially, and we're going to be paying for it as well by the destruction of our environment. The environmental destruction that's been caused by HS2 can't be underestimated. We're in a climate and ecological emergency. 108 ancient woodlands, 693 sites of nature reserve wildlife sites, 33 sites of special scientific interest are being devastated and destroyed by HS2. People's homes, 988 dwellings are being destroyed to create HS2. 19,590 businesses or jobs are going to be permanently displaced by HS2. So don't listen to Boris Johnson when he tells you that it's going to be a job creation scheme. Every single job that HS2 creates, even if you do take them out as worth 22,000, will cost £10.5 million. That's got to be the most expensive job creation scheme in the history of the universe at a time when, during the COVID pandemic, for the want of a few £1 million, businesses are going under and people are losing their lives, their livelihoods and their business and their jobs. Getting back to the point of the bill and why, as an HS2 protester, I believe that we should kill this bill. On my top, I've got here, protest is not a crime. And those of you who know me probably think, Bradley, you're usually looking very, very ditchy. You usually really take, you come out, you're looking like dressed to kill. Why are you wearing these grey sweats? These are my custody sweats. I was arrested for walking down a road with my dog. I was arrested because HS2 closed the public footpath, they closed the public highway, left me no alternative than to walk down the road 3-4 miles when I should have been taking a 3/4 mile walk, and I was arrested for walking in front of an HS2 truck that was behind because it's a narrow country lane. It's ridiculous. The ways in which the police already are abusing their powers to arrest protesters can't be underestimated. I see it on a daily basis. I see the police using powers that are inappropriate to arrest protesters. They already have enough power. They already are able to abuse their powers enough without this bill. Last week, 2 young, fierce warrior women were found guilty for protesting at HS2. Bizarrely charged with 241, which is the Trade Union and Labour Relations Consolidation Act of 1992. Inappropriate police powers are already being used to arrest protesters. When I was sentencing those young women, the judge, bizarrely, having just passed a guilty verdict, encouraged them to continue to protest. He said that in the future they'll probably be right in protesting, and quoted the suffragettes. Quoted to these young women, the suffragettes, that they were able to vote because of the suffragette movement, and yet he just found them guilty for protesting against HS2. Is ignoring its own democratic processes. There have been numerous petitions against HS2. The most current of that is a Chris Patten petition that's already at 157,000 people. When a petition passes 100,000, then the government should consider that parliamentary debate. Our government is ignoring its own democratic processes. So what other processes do we have other than to protest? When our government ignores its own democratic processes, what alternative do we have? And yet, can you imagine a government that's so terrified of its own people that it has to impose even more draconian laws? Can you imagine that? You don't have to imagine it, because it's happening right before our eyes. It's happening right now with this bill. The current laws and the current abuses of police powers are still not enough to contain our protest. In Milton Keynes Magistrates Court a couple of weeks ago, because the laws that they already have, the abuses that they already made, still weren't enough, an HS2 protester was injuncted by the police. The police took out a private injunction using public money to prevent an HS2 protester from going within 25 metres of any HS2 property. His home was right next to an HS2 property. The police imposed an injunction using public money to take out a private injunction against a man who lived within 25 metres of an HS2 property. I want to talk a little about the protest camps, because that young man lived on a protest camp, and currently there are 7 protest camps along the route of HS2. There have been 9. This law will seek to destroy those protest camps, which are very, very important as centres from which activists can go out and protest. But they're also people's homes. People have given up their jobs and their homes to go on to protest camps so that they can effectively become more actively in their protest against HS2. And this law will seek to make those protest camps illegal. And how it will do that is because of the effect that it's going to have on Romanies and travellers. Currently, if there are 2 or more vehicles gathered, if there's 6 or more vehicles gathered, the police can move them on and prevent people returning within 3 months. Under this bill, 2 or more vehicles will be moved on, and you won't be allowed to return for 12 months. So the proposals that will affect Romanies will also protect protest camps. And if you think about Clapham Common, about Whitehall protest camps, all the ones that have been in the past, they will be gone under the terms of this new bill. So it's absolutely imperative that we fight this bill and we kill this bill. Instead of turning down the noise, we must get louder and stronger. And even if this bill is passed, we won't stop. People are here today who fight all forms of injustice. Social injustice, racism, marginalisation, those with disabilities, and one cause which truly unites us all, and that's the environment. The environmental injustices caused by climate and ecological emergency, which is an existential threat to all life. It cannot just be the tiny representation that we've got here today that take responsibility for this humanitarian crisis. I urge everyone here to pledge that when you go home, you will tell everybody about what you've heard today. You tell everybody about this protest. And you encourage your friends and your families, your colleagues, your neighbours and members of your community to get involved, to find out about this bill, to find out about your interests, find out what they're interested in, what is it that they're passionate about. Go away and do that, because these protests cannot stop here. They won't stop here, because when we are oppressed and not listened to, that's when we will fight back even stronger, and that's what we must do.
Thank you. Can I have our last speaker, Louise, please?
No.
Can you hear it now?
Yeah,
Is that alright? I'm terrible. With any tech, I just destroy it. It's so good to see so many women here, particularly in the wake of the Sarah Everard terrible killings. Particularly impressed to see the young woman in the cape. More capes on demos. Thank you for coming, especially given that it's so cold. It's nice. Did you notice on the Sarah Everard vigil, the police justified attacking it because they said beyond a certain point it went a bit left wing. How do you gauge that? This is what we've got to ask, because this is what we're going to see if this bill goes through. Do they have like a machine that sort of says right wing, that's alright? Oh, go to read it. Somebody said Jeremy Corbyn. Someone Marks and Spencer shopping bag. It's got a bit left wing. Right, come on lads, we're going in. We know that, as lots of you have said, if the line is here for what the police should do, they will go here. So let's not move the line there and have them go way beyond it. I'm a protest historian, and I want to do a little whistle-stop tour of some of the worst policing of British protests. Some of the, all those protesters we're here, really, as the descendants of. In 1887, a peaceful protest about unemployment in London was attacked in Trafalgar Square by the army, by police, completely unprovoked. But of course, it was rioting, because it always is, isn't it? You got in the way of the police weapons, you were definitely rioting. The police used their horses to trample to death a young man called Alfred Liddell. He was really a bystander, he was observing, he was doing absolutely nothing wrong, portrayed in the press later in press illustrations as this rubbish little bloke with a baton attacking the police. He wasn't. The police trampled him and left him to bleed out on the pavement. There was a police ambulance, they didn't take him to it. It was other protesters who had to get into hospital where he died. He left two young kids orphaned because his wife had died previously, and he'd had to put his kids in the workhouse so he could work. So someone had to go and tell those children they were now orphans. People have talked about the suffragettes. In 1910, on what became known as Black Friday, working class suffragettes, Asian suffragettes, disabled suffragettes, it wasn't all posh white bankers, were assaulted for 6 hours continuously outside Parliament. They were sexually assaulted by police. Their clothes were ripped off, their breasts were exposed, they were thrown to gangs of anti-suffrage men who always turned up to beat up suffragettes, told, do what you want with her. Do what you want with her, lads. A disabled suffragette called Rosa Billinghurst was pushed by police into a back alley in London where gangs of these men went to assault women. They took the wheels off her wheelchair so she couldn't escape these men. The police left her there. Fortunately, this woman had so much guts, she just stared these men down. And they were so ashamed, they fixed her wheelchair and helped her get home. But that is not what the police did. Women were traumatised by that. You can imagine 2 women died within weeks of Black Friday, like her sister with brain hemorrhage. 1936, Paper Street, women were at Paper Street, women were assaulted in the same way. Did you see that woman in Manchester? She had accidentally been pulled down when she was being carried off by the police. Did you see the police eye lines as well? This poor woman. That happened at Paper Street. Women had their clothes ripped. Women who were fighting the police, not the fascists, in Paper Street. It was down to the women of the East End who saw this happening, who threw slot buckets on the police and ran down into the street. East End housewives, I like to think with rolling pins and their hair in curls, were so outraged by what the police were doing to these women, they chased some of them into a shed where the police hid for some hours. They did the same when Sylvia Pankhurst went to the East End to escape from the police. East End housewives ringed the house when the police tried to rearrest them, threw their shoes at them. The police retreated to the pub very, very sensibly. So we know, right, we could go on and on, we could talk about Blair Peach in 1979, not just Blair Peach, the teacher who was killed, leaving a demonstration, leaving an anti-Nazi demonstration. Bloke was trying to go home, like Sarah Everard was trying to go home, right? But Clarence Baker, the manager of Whiskey and Bruce, was also assaulted by police on that day. He was doing nothing, he was sheltering people. And they just shouted, "Get the black bastard," they put him into a coma, in a coma for absolute months. They then charged him with fighting, once he'd actually recovered and learned to walk and speak again. And we can talk about Welling in 93, I was there, I bet you're thinking you're far too young, Louise. You couldn't possibly be Welling in 1993, a young slip of a girl like you. But again, we were going back to our coaches, we were protesting at the end. We were attacked unprovoked by the police. We had to practically throw a Holocaust survivor who'd been addressing us over a wall to protect him. Do we want to give the police more powers? No! I think so. Do we want more undercover police as well with more powers? No! We don't. The message throughout history is clear. We have to kill the bill. Thank you.
Defund the police!
Right, can I ask everyone, if possible, can you move to the front of the station so I can get some picture of the media, for the media, and then we can actually use that picture to advertise further protests.